That feature you worked really hard on, you might have to cut it out. We're going to talk about why coming up. What's going on, guys? Team Ruswick here from Game Dev Underground, GDU.io, helping you build, finish, and launch better games. Today, we're going to talk about something that has plagued me along with a whole bunch of developers out there. I used to struggle with this a lot. I still struggle with this because your body has a bias to like the things that you create, right? Like your mind automatically tends to like the things that you made over other things. So we're going to talk about why working hard on something doesn't necessarily mean that you should keep it in. So a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I used to like to build massive scale sci-fi worlds, right? I used to build these huge amazing things, these huge amazing stories, these epic worlds, these epic battles, races of people, how they interacted with each other, like who was fighting who and all that kind of stuff. And I remember specifically for this game that I had, Echo 1, it was a really tiny, dinky little top-down tank game, but the world that I had built for it, I wanted to build a massive world so that a few of my different games could fit inside the same world, and I kind of tell multiple stories inside the same world. I thought that would be a really cool idea. But as I started creating new concepts, as I started building things, as I started adding things, I realized that some of the stuff just wasn't making sense, and I didn't want to cut anything because I had built it all. And when I first started building Echo 1 a long time ago, I think I must have been like 17, 18. So, you know, that was a good 10 years ago now. And when I came back to it a couple years later, like I found all the world building files that I did. I built maps, I built all kinds of crazy stuff that, like, it was actually pretty cool going back through it and discovering this whole world and these spaceships and these manufacturers and these companies and all this stuff. And I wanted to adapt that world to one of my newer games, Black Rim, which I've talked about a few times. But I felt like I couldn't, because that world was that world, and I had to work on this other thing. I had to build something new, and I went back and forth. Like, do I change this thing, or do I keep it the same out of nostalgia, just because like my younger self always wanted to create this? Like, do I create it that way as a nod to my earlier creativity, I guess, or something like that? I don't know what I was thinking, but I realized that, like, I was super hypersensitive to the fact of changing anything because I had built it. I had built it all. And this resurfaced later in a lot of my prototyping. Sometimes in some of the games that I was building, Phylophobia especially, I would add in mechanics. The mechanics wouldn't feel like they were 100% at home because it was a platformer game. It was a really simplistic platformer. And in platformers, the good ones, you can't just add in random mechanics. That's not how it works. Like, really good ones have like a single mechanic that they expand upon throughout the whole game. So just adding in random mechanics doesn't make sense. But that's what I was doing. I was just adding in random mechanics. And because I had spent so much time building this stuff and tweaking it and testing it, I really didn't want to let it go. But it wasn't until I got feedback on the game and I showed it to people and everybody said the same thing, and I was like, I don't want to admit this, but it's so hard to cut stuff that you've worked really hard on. And I think that is the lesson, right? In storytelling or in game mechanics or in programming, whatever, just because you worked hard on something doesn't mean it has to stay in your game. It doesn't mean it should stay in your game. Sometimes the stuff we work the hardest on is the last thing that should be in the game. And I learned that the hard way, right? Like, it's never fun to work days or weeks or months on something and then have to cut it out. But sometimes it doesn't work. And if you want to build a good game, if you want to build a great experience that a lot of people enjoy, you got to listen to a lot of people. You got to listen to the feedback that you get. You got to listen to what yourself is telling you when you play through it and it just doesn't feel right. So sometimes you have to cut out stuff that you worked hard on. And it's hard, man. Believe me, it's very hard. I hate to do it myself. I hate to make that shit happen and kind of cut the stuff that is just not there. But you know, I was talking to a friend a couple months ago, and we were talking about engineering, and he said one of his engineering teachers had told him, I'm going to butcher the quote, I'm sure it's by somebody famous or something, but he said that you can tell a great engineer not by when there's something left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. And I thought about that for a moment, right? Like, I sat there in silence. I was like, wow, that's really profound, because all of the greatest things in life are the ones that remove all of the unnecessary things that we don't need. Like, what made the iPod a great product? It removed all of the crazy stuff that everybody was trying to do. There was FM radio receivers. There was like, it was really complex. The software that you used, how you put MP3s in folders and then put them on a device like a memory card. It was like, they took away a lot of the freedom, right, with the device. They did the same thing with their phones, right? Compared to Android, they took away a lot of the freedom and the ownership that a lot of people had. They took away a lot of the stuff. But in doing that, they made it simplistic. They made it better in a way for certain people. They made something that could be really understood and really like appreciated for what it was. Now, I'm not a super Apple fan. I happen to like Windows and Android. But the Android builds that I like the best, I used to mod my phone a lot. I used to install different ROMs just because all of these companies add a bunch of stuff in on top of it. They make the experience complex. They add stuff you don't need. They add all these features. Everybody's trying to push their latest features. And sometimes the best things are a result of taking away all of the unnecessary stuff. In my book, I talk about categorizing features into one of three categories. You got the game changers, which are like the new stuff that no one's ever seen before that are really going to make the game. You got the showstoppers that is basically stuff that you got to have, or it wouldn't be a game. Like in a platformer, you got to have something that jumps. And then you have the stuff that is just a filler, the stuff that you really don't need. And anything that fits in that category, you should cut out, because it's not going to be beneficial long term. It's not going to... I'm talking about core mechanics too, right? Like, it's always good to have like collectibles or little extra details that can help the player. But I'm talking about like the core of the game here. Just because you worked hard on it does not mean that you should keep that part in. Or when in level design, in anything that you do, just remember that. And a lot of times we get so caught up in the thing that we build, we want to keep it in there. Like we think of, like, especially when I was designing levels for Phalophobia, I felt like every level was my masterpiece, and I wanted that. But I realized by watching people play it, like, dude, some of those levels are just, they're the wrong difficulty. They have the wrong pacing. They don't make sense how it works. Like, sometimes you just got to cut it out. So I've been preaching a lot about this lately, about cutting stuff out and cutting it in half and all that, but I thought you guys would find it useful. I hope you did. If you did, please leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you guys as always. But until next time, once again, I'm Tim Ruswick, and I'll see you next time.